Okay, picture this, a massive, sprawling city teeming with life, but it's not made of steel and concrete. Nope, it's built by millions of tiny animals. We're talking about a coral reef, of course. And just like any big city, it thrives on partnerships. But what happens when a total stranger shows up at the gates? Well, that is the exact mystery we're diving into today. You see, the most important friendship a coral has is with this microscopic alga called Symbiodinium. This isn't just a casual relationship, it's the foundation of the entire reef. The alga lives right inside the coral's tissue, and it's basically a tiny solar-powered food factory, providing up to 90% of the coral's energy. In return, the coral gives it a safe place to live. It's one of the most successful power couples in the entire ocean. So we've known about this perfect partnership for a long, long time. But here's the question. What happens if a different kind of algae shows up? A total unknown. How does the coral know if this new arrival is a potential friend or a foe in disguise? And that brings us right to our microscopic mystery. Scientists began noticing this new alga hanging around corals. And the thing is, this little organism has a really confusing family tree. And that makes figuring out its intentions incredibly difficult. So let's meet the players in this little drama. First, we have our host, the baby larvae of a common reef-building coral. Then you've got the trusted friend, the one we just talked about, Symbiodinium. And finally, the stranger, a newly discovered alga with the name Chromera velia. Now, this is where it gets really weird. Take a look at the stranger's relatives. On one side of the family, it's related to helpful algae like Symbiodinium. Okay, good sign. But on the other side of the family, it's the closest known photosynthetic relative to a nasty group of parasites called apicomplexans. That's the same group that includes the parasite that causes malaria in humans. So the big question is, which side of the family does this thing take after? The helper or the parasite? To figure this out, scientists needed a baseline, right? They had to know what a friendly conversation sounds like, biologically speaking. So they decided to essentially eavesdrop on the genetic dialogue between the coral and its old friend, Symbiodinium. So how in the world do you listen to a cell? Well, you use this amazing tool called transcriptomics. The easiest way to think about it is that every gene inside the coral can be turned on or off, or dialed up or down. Transcriptomics lets scientists see which genes are active at any given moment. It's literally like reading the cell's internal monologue second by second. So when the coral meets its trusted friend Symbiodium, what does that internal monologue look like? Well, it's surprisingly quiet. Only about 1,073 genes change what they're doing. Now, that might sound like a lot, but for the coral's entire genetic library, that's less than 3% of its genes. It's not a shout, it's a whisper, a very subtle, controlled reaction. And this quiet response is also super brief. The whole conversation hits its peak at just 4 hours, and by hour 12, it's completely over. The coral basically just says, "Oh, hey, it's you. Come on in." And then everything goes right back to business as usual. It's the picture of calm, easy acceptance. Okay, so now we have our baseline for a friendly hello. Now for the main event. What happens when the coral larva meets the stranger? Chromera. Is it the same quiet, calm conversation? Oh, not even close. The coral's genetic monologue goes from a whisper to a full-on deafening scream. A staggering 5,748 genes light up and change their activity. That's more than 16% of the coral's entire active genome. This is not a welcome. This is a 5-alarm fire. Red alert, all hands on deck. And the timing? The timing tells an even crazier story. Remember how the chat with the friend was over and done with in 12 hours? Well, with Chromera, at 12 hours, the freakout is just getting started. It keeps building and building, reaching its massive peak a full 48 hours later. This isn't a quick greeting. This is a long, drawn-out battle. So we know the reaction is massive and it's long, but what is the coral actually saying with all those activated genes? What is it trying to do? It's time to decode this genetic scream. So it all starts right here. When an alga gets inside a coral cell, it's immediately wrapped up in this little bubble, this cellular holding room, called a phagosome. And this is the moment of truth. This is where the coral has to make a critical choice. So what happens next is a fork in the road. If the occupant is a friend, like Symbiodinium, the coral hits the brakes. It arrests the process and turns that holding room into a safe, comfy, permanent home. But if it's a foe, The coral lets the process mature. It merges that holding room with the cell's acid vats, these things called lysosomes, and turns it into a little chamber of destruction. And the genetic evidence is just crystal clear. When it meets Chromera, the coral's genes start flipping switches like crazy. The genes for making a safe home, they get turned down. The genes for building that destruction chamber, they get cranked up. It is actively trying to digest the stranger. And get this, it even seems to suppress parts of its own immune system, which is a really complex response that we see in other animals when they're fighting off certain types of parasites. So, after listening in on the genetic conversations, decoding all the cellular machinery, and comparing the two very different reactions, the jury has reached a verdict on our mysterious stranger, Chromera. When you put it all side by side, it's just night and day. The encounter with the friend, it's subtle, it's quick, and it ends in acceptance. The encounter with the stranger, it is massive, it is prolonged, and it ends with an all-out effort at rejection and ultimately destruction. The researchers themselves put it perfectly in their paper. They said that based on the coral's genetic reaction, they have to conclude that whatever Chromera is, maybe a parasite, maybe just a freeloader, maybe just an accidental visitor, one thing is absolutely certain. It is not a friend. Now, I know this might seem like a really small drama, right? A tiny fight happening inside a single cell of a baby coral. But understanding these basic rules of engagement, well, that has massive implications for the health of entire reefs and really our whole planet.
Look, coral reefs are in serious trouble all over the world. We all know about coral bleaching. That's when warming oceans cause them to kick out their friendly algae. By figuring out how corals choose their friends and fight their enemies at the most basic genetic level, we get these incredibly important clues about their resilience. This is the key to understanding why some corals make it through tough times and others don't.
So the next time you see one of those beautiful images of a coral reef, just remember this whole story. The fate of that entire magnificent city depends on countless microscopic handshakes and invisible battles. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other invisible dramas unfolding right now in just a single drop of water are quietly deciding the future of our world?